What's up, skeptics? Welcome to another episode of Reason to Doubt, your source for all things skeptical. I'm Jordan, and we're kicking off the new year with a response video to a list, because if there's one thing that people love on the internet, it's response videos and lists. That's two things, doesn't matter. So Braxton Hunter of Trinity Radio put out a video titled 5 Questions for Atheists, all caps, in 2025. This is admittedly kind of low-hanging fruit, but hey, it's been a minute. We responded to the last one that he did 2 years ago. Link will be in the description. And, I got to kind of knock the rust off. Speaking of rust, at the end of this video, there'll be a channel update where I'll talk about what's been going on and what I think I'm going to be doing moving forward. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned to the end. Anyway, let's jump right in with question number 1.
We have these really powerful arguments, at least from our perspective, on the theist side, like arguments from fine-tuning. But yes, there are arguments on the other side that are meant to show that it's unlikely God exists or that God does not exist, like arguments from evil or divine hiddenness arguments. And so this puts us in an interesting spot. We've got arguments for and against. But as Philip Goff suggested recently, perhaps you have a God of limited power. This would mean you have really powerful arguments from God on the theist side, like the fine-tuning arguments. But then the arguments from evil and divine hiddenness no longer become powerful arguments for atheism. Instead, what they are arguments for a limited God, but not arguments for no God. And so there's no reason to take atheism seriously, someone might decide. So the question is Cameron wrong? And if so, why is he wrong?
So, yes, Cameron is wrong, or at least I think he's drawing the wrong conclusion. But this question coming from both Braxton and Cameron, strikes me as more than a little disingenuous. And it's dangerously close to your classic Mott and Bailey fallacy. So a Mott and Bailey, it comes from the old castle design, where there was the motte, which is the fortified structure on a hill, place it's easy to defend. That's where you keep the important things like your lords. And that would be surrounded by the bailey, which is a less fortified, still fortified, but less fortified, larger yard, where you kept houses and industry and stuff. So you wanted it, but it was less fortified. So when you were under attack, you would try to defend the bailey, but if it was clear you couldn't, you'd retreat to the motte, defend that. Once you repel the invaders, they'd go away, you'd reoccupy the bailey. So, likewise with this argument, the fallacy comes in when your actual position is position B, the bailey position. But that's too hard to defend. You don't want to have to do the work to defend that to counter the argument. So when you're in a discussion, you retreat to a different, usually related, but different position M, the motte. But once you're done with the argument, once you're done with position M, you just abandon that and go right back to the one you had, the one you didn't actually defend. Neither Cameron nor Braxton actually believe in this limited God they're talking about. They both very explicitly think that God does not exist, and in fact, they have arguments on their channel that they espouse that they claim are compelling against such a limited God. And you can see it whenever they engage in things like the Kalam cosmological argument. They'll claim from those principles you can get to a personal, powerful, infinite deity, blah, 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 blah. And I think they're wrong. But more for this, it's disingenuous for them to say, oh, well, we can disregard your position of atheism doesn't exist because you can't prove this other thing, a thing I don't believe, is false. But hey, let's pretend they aren't arguing out of both sides of their mouths for a second. Does this idea that there could be a limited God mean that we shouldn't take atheism seriously? So the two arguments he mentions, problems of evil, divine hiddenness, he is correct in as far as it goes that they would not necessarily rule out any and all types of deities, right? So what the problem of evil would do is show that the world as we see it is inconsistent with a powerful and benevolent deity. Divine hiddenness basically says that the universe we look around, we see it, and it appears to be one where there's no deity. It is our universe as we observe it is identical in all respects to a universe where no deity exists, right? So it's possible you could have a limited God that is limited enough to have no measurable, observable impact on the universe. Sure. But if that's the case, how is that any different from there functionally being no God at all? Like, in any practical sense, that's just atheism. If I have two possible worlds, if the world, as I see it, there's two possible models that fit the evidence. One is our world, has no God, and one is identical in every way to that one, except you also have a God kind of hiding out, not doing anything, then it would be absurd to believe that God exists. The more parsimonious explanation will be that no God exists, and thus you'd accept atheism. Now, note, I didn't say you've proved that there is no God. You don't need to do that to believe there are no gods. All that you need is to think that the existence of a deity or deities is unlikely. It's more likely false than true. That's all that is required. So don't fall into this trap of like, oh, you can't prove I'm wrong with something approaching certainty, therefore I'm right. There's also, it's wrong to have a dichotomy between theism and atheism. You could be an agnostic, for example. But anyways, if you thought that first question was pretty weak, then brace yourself, because don't worry, it's going all downhill from here, baby.
Some atheist creators seem to think that the recent presidential election was so important that it changes the way they should do things on their channels. Why do you think that this election was so impactful to atheists in this way? What did it reveal about the culture?
It's like the part I cut out there, and the original video is in the description if you want to see what I cut out. I just cut out him showing two clips of atheists basically saying they're going to take a step back, they're going to reassess what they're doing, etc., etc. So what did this reveal about the culture? This is the point in the video, we're still pretty early on, where I don't believe Braxton's being honest. I don't believe these are honest questions, because it is blindingly obvious to anyone who has spent any amount of time whatsoever speaking to someone on the other side. It's blindingly obvious what it revealed. But pretending that Braxton is not being dishonest, what it revealed is that people like Braxton saw a person, Trump, who has said he wants to use the military to execute his political enemies, who has said that his agenda includes ethnic cleansing of people who are a poison to the blood of America, and just, generally a monster of a human being, an adjudicated rapist who regularly lies, cheats, and steals. They looked at that and they said, yes, that is the person we want to lead us. Not like with hesitation either. Full-throated, full-chested support. In short, it showed that Braxton and people like him are either fascists or are fine with fascism as long as it gets them to the Christian nationalism they actually want. Another word for that latter group would be fascist sympathizer, and another word for that is fascist. Now, this wasn't exactly news. The fact that Trump is a fascist has been apparent for a very long time, for anyone's paying any attention at all. What this election did, though, was put into stark contrast that the American right would be happy to indulge him in his darkest, most authoritarian fantasies. Before this, you might be able to delude yourself into thinking they didn't realize what was happening, or they were holding their nose. But no, at this point, especially after the Madison Square Gardens rally, it was blindingly clear exactly what the agenda was, and the right fell over themselves to capitulate or to strongly endorse this fascist agenda. And so this shows that we are fast approaching a world where it will be physically dangerous to be someone who disagrees with the Christian nationalist agenda. It showed that I, right now, as I'm recording this, am putting my life at risk by stating an opinion that is contrary to the opinion that will be held by those who control all levers of government in about a week at time of recording. It also showed that people like Braxton don't give a single shit about it if I'm killed, as evidence for the fact that he voted for it to happen. So, yeah, that's what it revealed. But Braxton already knew all of that. He's just pretending that he has no idea what could possibly be going on, even though he's been told over and over and over what's going on. It's all so he can keep this friendly Christian charade while condemning the rest of us to death and destruction. It's ridiculous. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's go to question 3.
Many atheists are determinists, meaning that they don't believe in free will, at least not of the sort that many people think of when they hear the term free will. They believe that the past history of the universe is like to a billion trains of dominoes or trillions of chains of dominoes that result in the past history of the cosmos, the formation of your physical body, your past life experiences, your neural structure, and the firings of neurons in your brain that are your choices, but could not have been otherwise. So here's my question. If you're a determinist, how do we hold people morally culpable for things they do that could not have been otherwise, given the history of the universe?
So, just a little free will bit, just a quick aside, just quickly number 3, just explain all free will. So free will is a topic that could take up a whole bunch of videos all by itself, but I'm going to focus on what I think the important part of this question is, and that is that I think Braxton's entire point is self-defeating given his worldview. So, according to that question, according to Braxton, if the universe is deterministic, that means that things could not have been otherwise. Your choices, your biology, all the things that make your choices were determined from the dawn of time, and therefore it would be inconsistent to hold someone morally culpable for something that could not have been otherwise. They chose, but that decision was always set, and therefore how can we justify holding them accountable? But here's the thing. Braxton, if he's right, is in exactly the same situation as he's throwing at us. The God that Braxton believes in is both omnipotent and omniscient. That means that they are all-powerful, they can do anything, any logically possible things, the way it's usually expressed, and they have perfect knowledge of all things, the results of all of their actions. So this is a deity who allegedly created the universe, the cosmos, the multiverse, whatever we have, and everything in it. And at the moment of creation, moment's a little tricky here because he's outside of time, but, our language is inextricably linked to time. Just, I understand that's a problem. Let's move past it. So at the moment, he's deciding to create the cosmos. He has all of these options, all the infinite options in front of him. And he could have chosen any version he wanted. He could have chosen this world, Cosmos A, where I'm born into a fundamentalist religious belief tradition, and that kind of fragile tradition ultimately led to a crisis of faith, and that led me to atheism. Or perhaps he could have chosen Cosmos B, where I was born into a, maybe more robust, well-developed religious tradition, and I kept my faith. Or Cosmos C, where I was born into a Muslim family. That's not that far-fetched. My great-grandfather was Muslim. And so on and so on to D, E, all the way to infinity. Any possible choice I could make, he had in front of him when he was making the cosmos. So he picked this version, knowing with absolute certainty, with perfect clarity, with the impossibility of being wrong, that if he chose this cosmos, he would know exactly what choices I made in that cosmos. And if he chose a different one, he would know exactly what choices I would make in that one. And that's true not just for me, but for every human being, in fact, every creature to have ever lived. As a result, God has, in essence, chosen for us by virtue of choosing the cosmos in which we would choose the thing. From the beginning of time, from creation, we could not have done differently. It could not have been otherwise because God already picked it. Everything in this idea is preordained. And so, if Braxton's correct, and the thing that makes it impossible or unreasonable to hold someone morally culpable is that they could not have done otherwise, well, then Braxton can't hold people morally culpable either. I've got bad news for you, bud. You need to go talk to God, I guess. So my answer to this would be just to put the answer back on you, Braxton. If the problem you have is that things are determined from the beginning of time, well, then not both of us have this problem. So at best, it is not a differentiator between our two positions. So don't worry about it. Question 4.
Richard Dawkins has long been praised by atheists as one of the 4 horsemen of the new atheism. But recently, he's caused some controversy with some comments about the trans debate. For many atheists, he's right about science when it comes to young earth creationism versus evolution, but he's wrong when it comes to this current cultural debate. Do you personally think he's right or wrong, and why?
In short, yes, Richard Dawkins is wrong. Now, I think that the framing that Braxton chooses here is clumsy at best, but I think it's a little tricky because he says, Richard, you think, you atheists at large, believe that Richard Dawkins is right when it comes to the science about young Earth creationism and the age of the Earth. But when it comes to the cultural question of the trans debate, he's wrong. Now, you notice the shift from that is science, the thing he's right in, to this is a cultural debate, as if there's no scientific input. Of course there is. But kind of more generally, he seems to be implying, at least, that it's inconsistent to think that Richard Dawkins is right about this thing, but wrong about this other thing. But, I mean, people are right about some things and wrong about other things all the time. This is a completely mundane thing. In fact, I know for a fact that Braxton not only understands this, he agrees, because he and every other Christian who is suddenly in love with Dawkins, now that he's just as bigoted as they are, believes that they believe this exact thing about Richard Dawkins. They think he is right about his bigotry towards trans people, but that he's wrong about everything else. So, yeah, I think he's right about this one thing, the thing that he studied in college and got his PhD in, and he's wrong about all the other bullshit that he does. More than that, though, Dawkins is just completely irrelevant. He's not the Pope of atheism. I don't give a shit what this bigot does, thinks, or says. Like, he doesn't speak for me, and he doesn't speak for any other atheists. Let's move on to question number 5. This one's on fine-tuning, and he goes through, like, a long setup. We've all heard it before, so go watch it if you want to see it. Basically, he does the usual, imagine there's an amazing structure, it's perfectly suited for our needs, blah, 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 and then the universe is finely tuned, you're balanced on a razor's edge for life, blah, 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 and here's a list of facts. So here's the question after he does all that build-up.
Now, these are some of the kinds of facts that are often used to make fine-tuning arguments, some of the best arguments for God's existence according to almost everyone involved. So here's the question. Are we wrong to think that this supports theism? If so, why?
So, yes, it might support theism in some kind of weak way, in that it's hard to say, because you could say it would be expected under theism that things would be finely tuned for life, but there's no real reason for that. A deity could just as easily create life that's exceptionally robust and could have survived under a broad range of values for universal constants. I don't see any real reason why it would be more or less likely under theism. But I'm not even going to check those facts for accuracy because it's completely immaterial. And any time this comes up, there's always some list of this constant or that force or this thing, and it's some arbitrarily small difference. And if it was this tiny bit different, some 10 to the big number difference, then life couldn't happen. And boy, isn't that amazing. But, like, is it amazing, though? Like, how tight is this balance actually? It's not enough to say if it changed by 1 part in a million or something to say, oh, it's finely tuned. What's the range of possible values it could have? What's the distribution within that range? Is there a range of possible values? Are all of these values actually connected to something more fundamental, and that thing could only have 1 value, or only 2, or only 3, or 1,000,000? I don't know. And nobody else does. So there's no way we can say this set of conditions is unlikely, because we don't know what likely looks like. And while we're at it, what are the conditions that are suitable for life? We have a sample size of 1. We don't know. Remember, we're not just talking about life as we know it, a bunch of talking apes on an Earth-like planet, but any life at all. Any intelligent life, I guess we could say charitably. What are the range of conditions that could support some form of life, including life completely alien to our conception of life? The answer to that, nobody knows. We just don't know enough. It isn't known whether these physical constants could have had different values, what range those values could have been. I mean, there are a lot of ideas. There's a lot of theoretical models, but none of them have been established as fact yet because we just don't understand enough about the universe to say. It's reasonable, even if we don't know everything there is to know about how life arose. There are certainly certain configurations of constants that would make it so that life is impossible. Like, if atoms couldn't form, it's hard to see how you could get life, right? But there are also completely plausible explanations that explain this whole thing, even if they're not yet known to be true. It's likely that we live in some kind of multiverse. If there's different kinds of multiverses, I've talked to a Christian physicist about that, link in the description, but there are some multiverses that are plausible and fit with what we know so far about how the universe works, where the physical constants and laws could be somewhat different from our own. So you could have different regions in the cosmos where they have different values for all these finely tuned things. And if that's the case, then it's not surprising at all that you find us in a finely tuned universe, because the universes that are amenable to life arising is where you'll find life. So no problem at all. Do we live in such a multiverse? I don't know. Neither does Braxton. My point here is not that we don't know, therefore not God, but my point is that we don't know, therefore this isn't good evidence for God. We don't know. We don't know means we don't know, and that's all it means. There's just too many unknowns for this to be compelling to me, and hopefully to everyone else. So, those are the 5 questions for atheists, though one of them was more just questions for people on the left, I guess, but whatever. I gotta say, this is a much more disappointing list than his first round. The first round actually kind of seemed like at least reasonable questions, but I don't know. Maybe he'll do another one a year or two, and those will be better. But anyways, thanks for coming to the end of the content in this video. At the top, I promised a channel update, so I'm going to talk about that. If you're not interested in that, if you don't care, no problem. Just comment down below if you thought my answers were wrong or if you would have answered them differently. I'm interested to hear what you have to think. And subscribe so you don't miss me doing great reaction, YouTube stuff. I don't need to tell you to do this. Anyways, so for those of you who are still here, hi, it's been a while. You may have noticed that I haven't put out a video in like 2 months. And you may have also noticed that I stopped producing videos right about the time that a certain political event happened in America. That's not a coincidence, but it's not the only reason that I stopped for a while. So basically a bunch of things conspired and they hit all at once. First off, I have a second job. So I have a main job, a nuclear engineer, but I have another job based on a skill set from a previous thing, and that pays quite well, but it comes inconsistently. It comes in waves, and in October and November, I got a huge wave of work. It took up all my free time. The money was great. I was happy to get it, but it did kind of drain my social and creative battery for a while. And then we rolled right into the busy holiday season. Around the same time, my channel partner, Jared, decided to take a step back from this YouTube thing. We'd been talking about it on and off for a while. He's just not enjoying it like he had been. It's nothing dramatic. We're still very good friends, but it's just not fun for him. And this is a hobby, so it should be fun. So, at least for the time being, he's stepping away. He might come back later, he might make an appearance, but it means that the bulk of the work that he was doing, which is primarily the editing stuff that he was much better at and enjoyed, now I have to do that all by myself. Then, at the same time, America elected an open fascist. And on top of all of that, that led me to kind of take a step back, and I had to assess what's the risk of me maintaining this vocal platform that I have where I sometimes say the truth that Trump is a fascist and Christian nationalism is a bad thing. So what does that mean for me and those that I care about, that I'm objecting to a government that has every indication, it seems, of in the future, in the very near real future, persecuting people who don't agree with them? I don't think we're in this position yet, but we are aimed at a position in America where a YouTuber being labeled as terrorist is not a crazy thing to happen. And that's something that we have to consider. So all of that led to me taking a brief hiatus from this channel to figure out what I want to do, if I want to keep going, So what I concluded was that, one, I still enjoy making these videos, and I like engaging with the community and the people who comment, and I've met a lot of really great people, including some of my closest friends on this platform, and I'd like to continue doing it. Two, that this is a hobby, and doing it all by myself means that I won't be able to do it as much as I want to if I want to keep up the quality of the videos and not cut into the rest of my life, because I do enjoy this. This is not the most important thing I do by far. 3, I refuse to preemptively surrender to fascism, but I have to balance that with the risks involved of being a dissenter under a government led by a person who has openly said he will kill those who disagree with him. And 4, if I make much more Shroud of Turin content, I'm going to throw up. So to that end, the channel is going to be evolving a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what it looks like, but what I'm thinking right now is that video frequency will probably be something like every other week with maybe a fun like live stream thrown in the margins. This is not optimal for YouTube. The algorithm harshly punishes anyone who doesn't put out content religiously every week, but I don't think I can keep up that pace. So I'm going to try to be better at posting the videos audio to podcast platforms. I've said I would do that many times and failed many times in the past, but I swear this time I'm actually going to do it. 3, there's going to be less Shroud of Turin content. I think I've done as much investigating into that as I care to do, and honestly, the evidence isn't compelling. I don't think there's that much more that's worth the time and effort to scrutinize it, and I don't want to become repetitive. So less is not 0. I do intend to finish my radiocarbon series. I should have 1 or 2 videos on that at some point. Bob Rucker's done some craziness that I might respond to. And, whenever the interest strikes me, if I see a particularly good video or something, I'll talk about it. But that interest is going to strike me a lot less. So, yeah, I'm going to have to also balance what content I make, keeping it honest, but balancing the risks of saying things. Yeah, so that's what the channel is going to look like, I think. That's where we stand. If you're still here, thanks for sticking to the end. Let me know in the comments what you think I should be doing with this channel. While I do this primarily for me and my own interests, because, again, it's a hobby, part of the joy is giving people information that I think they'll find useful and that they tell me they enjoy, who doesn't like, entertaining. So let me know what you want. But until next time, remember, you've always got reason to doubt.